What's up, world? It's your boy, Mike Muse, for the episode of the Mike Muse Show. I am so excited to be in conversations with my next guest. They're just simply dope. I really had the chance. I know Sacha's work previously, but I got a chance to know Ty James off record, before we started. And she's become my fast friend. We're doing food, wine, cherries, and home decor together in the next couple of weeks. And so it's going to be awesome. But they're not here to talk about our personal lives. They're here to talk about the life of an incredible man, Ty's father, Mr. Rick James. There is a new documentary coming out on Showtime called Bitchin', The Sound and Fury of Rick James. Without further ado, the directors and producers of this incredible documentary, Miss Ty James and Mr. Sacha Jenkins. What's happening, people?
Hey.
Hello. What up? What up?
What up? What up? What up? What up? So I just want to get this right to it, right? Because Ty, the opening of that documentary was so cold, how you rolled into the frame. Talk to me about how important, Sacha, it was for that tone to be set right away. With Ty bump into the music, looking fly, looking dope. Because to me, that set the tone for the documentary right away.
Well, I wish I can't take credit for Ty looking fly or having a fly car. And I certainly can't take credit for her singing along to the music. I wish I could. But, I knew that going to the storage facility and unpacking the man's life, we were going on this journey and it's emotional for someone like Ty. So I wanted to be able to connect with her and that emotion and connect with her dad in a way that, oddly, interestingly enough, articles and material items stir up memories. I mean, she talked about the bench that, she had serious heart-to-hearts with her father, and it's the first time she had seen it in, who knows, 15 years. There's a feeling there. And I knew that we would be able to capture that. And, what you saw in the cars, that's everyday Ty, get used to that. But when you see her having those moments, reconnecting with, memories of her dad, that's what I wanted to capture. And I think we were successful.
What's interesting, Ty, is that normally those of us connect with artists through maybe their music, or we're talking about Basquiat just a few minutes ago, through their artwork. And so what I love was the contrast of, from a viewer and listener, we were connecting to your father through the music, but then seeing you look through the artifacts and his art, you were having more of a physical and emotional connection. Talk to us about the feeling you had of unpacking your father's items in the storage unit.
I mean, that's always going to be very, touching. And there's so many memories. Oh my God, there's so many stories. And that's like everything that he's ever had in his whole entire life. So just, instantly the memories and the visuals pop in your head, and it can be very it's a sensitive moment. Yeah. And it's not anything that you can not feel it. No matter what you do, there's no escaping it. And then being, the person that he is, and I always refer to him in the present, so excuse me for that, but those lessons and moments, they stick with you and they just come flooding back in. So, some good, some not so good, but we take it as it is and roll with the punches. So
I believe that too as well, that our loved ones are always with us still. And then with you in particular, you have the privilege of having the music experience always there. When you hear the music, what does that invoke? Does it change depending upon your situation, right? When you hear his voice.
It's funny that you say that, because there are still songs that soon as I hear the first note drop or the first beat drop, I forward it, because it's just way too emotional. Hollywood is one of them. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, but that song I can't listen to it. Fire and Desire is another one. And it's a great record. Him and Tina, probably one of the greatest duos of all time. It's just his demeanor and character, and the Ibiza, the man that he is, just comes through so much in those records. It feels like he's right there in front of me singing it.
That is very powerful, because even this weekend, I'll be at a wedding. And me and my friend, she's getting married, and in college, that's all we listened to was Tina and Rick James and Together, and those collaborations were insane. Sacha, why now? Why did you think that the story needed to be told in this moment of where we are right now?
Well, his story is extremely contemporary. He was a man culturally who was extremely literate in that he could relate to so many different people, and his interest in so many different ideas and cultures, the way he put it together made him the unique person that he was. And I think that, him talking about how African-American musicians were sort of cookie cutter for a long time, had to answer to someone. He was someone who was making his own style and blazing his own trails. And that's what young people today do. I keep referencing, Pharrell, but he's a guy who culturally and musically had a lot of different interests and created a very unique voice for himself. And I think Rick James was someone who was doing that obviously a long time ago. And that's what makes him current and relevant and someone that people want to know about. So today was a great time to make a film like this.
I think that's what you're hitting on. We're living in an era of like information, and people want to unpack people and unpack the layers. And I think for what Rick James always has lived musically, we've always, heard or seen or witnessed, some of the things that happen outside of the music. But, he's always such this musical person that we hadn't, at least for myself personally, watching the documentary, felt like I didn't know. I'm glad that these layers were able to get unpacked. But I'm curious, Sacha, and I love interviewing directors, because the guys all have like decision points and why you place things in certain ways and where that you do. Why did you come in so early with the sexual assault that happened to him as a boy? And then why did you choose to use animation? And I say that because the timing was so quick for me, but then it gave a lot of context in my mind about how that's formed and shaped what I knew of Rick James. So I'm curious your decision point for that.
Yeah, I felt it was important to create balance, and it's easy to focus on the drama and the salacious nature of things he was accused of and things he was convicted of. But let's go all the way back and try to understand what might have informed some of his decisions. And, as he talks about it himself, he said back in those days, there was no group that you can call if you were sexually abused. You just beat somebody down, and his mama came in and whipped some ass. And that's how we dealt with things back then. It's a different time now, and people have support, and more of us are more willing to talk about these things and hopefully get help. But, that doesn't excuse things he was accused of, but it might give you insights into why he might have made some of the decisions that he made. And it's very important for people to understand who he was as a human being, totally, not just as someone who was in the news of not for music, but for other stuff.
Well, Ty, you was around the other stuff that Sacha just left off on. Did you learn anything that you didn't know about your father through the making of this process? Because a lot of times, families, we don't talk about things, right? Until much later. I learned so much about my grandfather, like as an adult, and he passed away when I was young. But I learned so much about him, like in my older age, than I did in my younger, and I made my mom and dad talk about it. So I'm just curious for you, did you learn in this process?
Okay, so I think because my dad being the man that he is, it was not really any secret. So I kind of was abreast of everything. I really pay attention to, the lifestyle. And the only thing that I would say that he never did drugs in front of me, hard drugs. I'm referring to crack cocaine. And I've never seen him indulge at all. And I think he always wanted to try to pretend that wasn't taking place. Of course, the marijuana was in abundance. I've definitely seen some coke, but that part of it was the part that I think he wanted to make sure that, he didn't do in front of me.
Mm-hmm. What was like, when you were in collaboration with Sacha to tell this story, What was like that North Star for you? What was that North Star that was guiding you to say, this is what I want to get across about my father? Like, this is the North Star.
Yeah, it's funny that you asked that, because every step of the way, I really feel like my dad was there guiding, guiding our route and path. And I was never uncomfortable, with anything. Yeah, parts were painful, but this is the man, he was. So the way that Sacha brought it across was definitely in a way that I feel like it was relatable, because people have these struggles, but they don't necessarily speak on them, now. So it's a good lesson. And the other reason I really wanted to share it with people, because it's a lesson either way. It's a lesson of the decisions and choices that you should not make, and choices that, end up horrible from a drug related incident. Like, and most of the decisions that people make in life that are bad are usually drug induced. So those are the things that I definitely didn't have a problem with sharing, but sometimes would be a little bit difficult. But I just think that star was, my dad.
I love that. Well, then, Sacha, I asked Ty about her North Star. She gave us a lot about the drugs and who he is. What were your guardrails that you had in place for this documentary? Because documentaries, particular documentaries of a legend such as Rick James, can go off the rails because there's so much to explore. There's almost too much. But yours was very disciplined. And so I'm really, in terms of discipline, in terms of how you told the story, it's very tight, very linear. What were your guardrails that you had as you were making this documentary? You're on mute, Sacha.
Simple journalism. People have lost sight of journalism. People are confused by journalism. People are doubting journalism. I rely on journalism for everything that I do. And so when you do that, you look for balance. And, in order to tell his story, you've got to tell the good and the bad. And the most important thing, though, is that at the end of the day, he's a fantastic musician. And so you have to tell the good and the bad, but you also have to unpack the musicianship and the influence. And as a musician myself, learning all the things I learned about his journey along the way, and hearing all the incredible music pre-Rick James, knowing that all the things that he had to overcome. I tell people he didn't really get on until he was 30. What rapper today would stick around for 10 years trying to get on? You get laughed at. So his music and his determination and all of those things mixed with everything else were equally as important to me as the things that were scandalous. And so I just wanted to make sure there was a fair amount of time devoted to each of these aspects of his life, so we understood who he was.
With that being said, because I love that you brought in journalism into it, and I love the sensationalism, meaning I think the journalist in you, and I know you as a journalist, and so I know you're not a sensationalist, right? You're not a clickbait, right? And so I think if anyone else probably would have done it, it would have been more sensational, right? And so as you balance telling the equitable story of who he is, speaking in present tense, like Ty has been mentioning, what came first, the chicken or the egg for you? Like, how did you want to focus on the music? Did you want to have the music inform the person, or do you want the person to inform the music in terms of how you presented Rick James' story?
Well, Black music is always a reflection of and a reaction to their environment. So I figured you got to start with the music itself. When you unpack the music, everything that's went into the music is easily seen. So I don't even believe in genres anymore. I'm doing a film about Louis Armstrong. Louis Armstrong caught a gun charge at 14 and went away to reform school. James Brown, Rick James, all these people have similar stories coming out of their neighborhoods and the trauma that they've experienced. And I wanted people to understand that Rick James, all of us who come from these environments, have trauma that is not processed. And you can see that in the music. If you really pay attention, you can see that trauma in the music. So with me, it started with the music, and everything came after that.
Ty, did you see the trauma showing up in the household, or was it normalized for you that you didn't see it as trauma? How did that trauma show up for you in the household?
I mean, I think the most traumatic things we had to deal with was just, you know, the constant struggle, and I'm referring to the later years, but it was just us trying to prevent him from, you know, indulging. And that to me was the most traumatic part, because I talk about it all the time. It's not just the addict that's affected. And I really want to start like a support group and foundation about the people outside of the addict, the family members, the, you know, the spouses, the, you know, just everybody, that it's not just the addict, it's the drug addiction, that you all struggle from it. Because I've been to countless AA meetings, you know, with and without my dad. So it's just, you know, those traumatic things that, and it's really, it's very, very, it's like a relentless struggle to not want them to do it so bad that it almost feels like it's you trying to prevent yourself from doing it, if that makes sense. So
it absolutely does. Which I think that's why I want to ask that question, because what I love what you guys have done with this is you've shown Rick James a human, right? Versus like this sensational artist or character that media and society has painted. It's almost, you guys are taking back the narrative and showing the human aspect of it. And we as humans all struggle, right? And we as all humans have so many different things that we're dealing with. It shows up differently, but we all are experiencing trauma in our own way. I'm curious, Ty, you know, what I mean by that is like Rick James, I thought he had multiple lives, right? Like we knew Rick James in person, we knew Rick James as this incredible artist. But then when Dave Chappelle came, he became almost like a one-line individual. And I'm just curious, I know your father passed away in the physical in 2004. I know the Chappelle show started in 2003. Was your father aware? I couldn't remember if that Rick James bitch came before your father's transition, or was he still with us at the time?
Oh no, he was definitely still with us. They actually did a lot of those recordings together, the Charlie Murphy, the Eddie Murphy. Like, this is their genuine relationship. And that's how, funny as it may be, that's how they treated each other. And it's just so funny to see. Like, that's why it came across like that, because they would really like slap the shit out of each other. Yeah. Like, for real. And Val, to this day, I mean, not trying to be funny, but she will lift her top up and show you her titties. Like, she thinks she has the most beautiful boobs on the whole entire planet. These things is natural. You see that? Pay for that. I'm like, girls, pay for that. I'm like, oh my God, Val. But that's just, you know, the fun and crazy charismatic way that they really, really treated each other. And he was totally in union with that. I'm Rick James, bitch, the skit with Dave.
What do you think that did for Rick James' legacy, that moment?
It definitely, you know, brought more awareness, and I feel like it catapulted, because it was another stamp on, you know, the man that he is. Just like, yep, like it was great, but it also is signature Rick James. So it's not like it was so shocking, you know? Yeah. So, well, and
it's a very modern moment too, not to cut you off, but like, this is what people expect from entertainers. You know, you've got to have a big personality. I mean, in many cases, the big personality trumps good music. He just happened to have good music and a big personality.
Right.
No, absolutely. Well, Sacha, as I conclude and ask this last question, you know, it seems really cheesy, but I'm actually been really curious, because Rick James is so layered, and this comes out in this documentary. What is that your hopes after people watch it? What do you hope their takeaway will be about Rick James?
I mean, I never like to tell people what to think. All I can do is present all the numbers, right? And the equation at the end can add up to what you want it to add up to, but you can't say that you didn't have the proper tools to come to a place, right? And music is subjective, music is personal. We're at a time where it's the Me Too era. People feel a way about people who conduct themselves in particular ways. You got to ask yourself, was Rick James a man of his time? The times have changed, right? You can go back in a time machine and point fingers at lots of people who are doing things at a different time. It's a different time, right? But all of this stuff is really subjective. And I wanted to make sure that whatever opinion you formulated by the end, you knew from the beginning to the end what he had been through and who he was and how he became who he was. And from there, if you want to judge him, that's great. But at the end of the day, the music is classic and timeless and it's seemingly not going away. And, Ty James drives a fly car and she's keeping it tight because she's looking out for her family legacy. But part of it is the legacy don't stop. She's getting phone calls all the time about wanting to work with his music. So he's still here. He's a part of our lives, whether you know it or not.
And that's why Ty keeps him in the present. And I love that about you, Ty. No, Ty, thank you for being the custodian of the great legacy that is your father, Rick James. Thank you for being your flyness in the opening scene all the way to the Mike Muse show, looking at you right now. And thank you for sharing him with us in a very intimate way. And I think a lot of people can learn a lot about empathy. And I think you touched on it really well, Ty, when you said understanding the complexities of addiction and what that can mean and how that shows up in families.
Yeah. Well, you're so very welcome. Thank you for having us and thanks for listening.
Yeah, I'll see you in Atlanta at the next restaurant, Ty, or I'm gonna knock on your door for that good oatmeal recipe.
Okay, I got you.
Ladies and gentlemen, the amazing Ty James and the also two amazing Sacha Jenkins. Make sure you watch on Showtime, Bitchin', the sound and fury of Rick James. You would not be disappointed. Till next time, folks, peace.